Let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Marwa Ibrahim. I am faculty here at NYU Langone and also Bellevue Hospital, pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine. I'm one of the co-chairs of the ATS SRN Early Career Working Group, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's My First Grant Clinic session, Dr. Jeremy Orr. Dr. Orr earned his MD from Washington University, followed by residency at UCLA and pulmonary critical care fellowship at UC San Diego. He currently serves as an associate professor at UCSD, where he balances his clinical role with a very highly productive research program. His work focuses on the intersection of physiology and technology, specifically in neuromuscular respiratory weakness and non-invasive ventilation. Dr. Orr helped build the pulmonary neuromuscular and assisted ventilation program at UCSD and continues to lead it as director, bringing national expertise to the field of chronic respiratory failure. Dr. Orr has published extensively in high-impact journals, including the Blue Journal, the Lancet, and Sleep. As physician scientist who has successfully secured multiple NIH grants, Dr. Orr has a firsthand understanding of the transition to independent funding. We are so grateful to have him share his expertise on navigating the grant process. So please welcome me in welcoming Dr. Jeremy Orr.
Thank you for that really nice introduction, Marwa. So let me share my slides here. Well, I think the format of this session is that I'm going to talk for a bit, hopefully not too long, hopefully not too short. And then we're going to open it up, I think, for a bit of question and answer and maybe some more interactive component. I'm associate professor at UC San Diego, and I don't claim to be the world's expert on all things grant funding related, but I think maybe one insight that I can bring is that I'm, relatively close still to the beginning of my research journey, hopefully not close to the end of my research journey, but I hope that what I can relay reflects stuff that those of you that are on the call that are, earlier career than me might find interesting and are kind of thinking about. So just a little bit more about my background and my path into research. As Marwa had said, I did clinical fellowship in pulmonary critical care and UCSD. And, I had always sort of thought maybe I would do some research and I thought it was fascinating. I ran, journal clubs and those kinds of things, but I really um, didn't exactly know how to operationalize that into, a real part of my career. Until I, met my mentor. My mentor's Atul Malhotra, who folks may know. He's been heavily involved with ATS and is a very accomplished physician scientist. And he moved to UCSD in 2013, 2014. And that was really perfect timing for me because he was looking for mentees, and I was about to start my third year of fellowship, which was, protected research time. And institutionally, we have a T32, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And so, I kind of got going thinking about research projects and started actually doing research at that time, mainly focused on sleep apnea and pulmonary hypertension. And, got some original research data collected and published. And, I really sort of caught the bug at that point and started to see how that could play out in terms of me getting future grants and continuing on with research and publications and things like that. Um, I, in 2015, joined as sort of junior faculty, um, and was doing more clinical work while applying, basically. And I applied for this F-32, which I'll talk about a little bit later, in 2015. And it was interesting because it got scored, and then it took a long time to get a notice of grant award. Like I think from the time I applied to the time I actually got the money, it was almost a year, which is sort of crazy, or at least was crazy back then. Maybe it's just the norm now. But that was awarded in 2016, and so that gave me, a couple more years of runway. Of course, we don't sort of rest on our laurels, and so I applied for other grants, and including the ATS Foundation grant, which was a 2-year grant, and I'll talk more about kind of these foundation grants. I applied for that in 2017, and that was, I think, like late 2017, awarded in 2018, and so that really worked well because it sort of started when I finished that F-32. And I also started applying for K-23s at that time, and I had some publications, and I felt like I was ready for that. Um, so that original application, which an A0 is sort of the original application, the initial submission, was in 2017. It was not, I think it was not discussed and was not funded, obviously. I reapplied, so an A1 is a resubmission, and that I believe was scored but was not funded. So I was starting to worry a little bit at that point. I applied for American Academy of Sleep Medicine as a bridge fund that's supposed to be for folks that are trying to get a K, and I applied in 2019, and that was not awarded. And now I'm coming towards the end of this ATS Foundation funds. And I realized, I think, that continuing with the application that I had written for my original K-23, which was focused on sleep apnea and COPD, just wasn't getting a lot of traction in that space. And the comments and, kind of interacting more with people in that, in the COPD world, seemed like a little less interested. And so I pivoted in 2019 a little bit to focus more on sleep apnea and opioids and kind of control breathing and those kinds of things. And so I applied in 2019, got a decent score, was not funded. And at this point, I'm basically uh, run out of this ATS Foundation funds. So I applied again in 2020 with the resubmission, and that was funded in 2021. So now I'm coming to the tail end of that. So I did have some gaps in funding there, and certainly, this was a relatively slow path. I will say, along the way here, I mean, I had a couple kids and, started this ventilation neuromuscular program and, lots of other things happened. So, um, everyone's path is a bit different. Mine, I think, was not super speedy, but nonetheless was, as you can see, pretty um, persistent. 2024, I started thinking I'm going to need to, get something after this K-23 and continue the research. I applied for an R01, focused more on opioids and sleep apnea. Got scored but not funded with pretty encouraging comments. Reapplied for that in 2025 and got a fifth percentile on that. And of course, right after that, the government shut down and all the other kind of stuff going on with reorganization at the NIH, and she's still waiting for the funds to come through on that. Along the way, I also applied for lots of other small grants, institutional things and lots of stuff that was pretty much not funded. I mean, I applied for basically any opportunity that seemed like it made sense. So hopefully that illustrates. I don't know how typical this is. I mean, my sense is that I'm not, maybe totally the norm in terms of how this has proceeded along, but I'm not sure there really is a norm. And I think, hopefully, again, one thing that you take away from this is that success is not guaranteed, and it's a bit of a long, path, but persistence is sort of the key.